This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Why is it that our opponents so steadfastly ignore the truth? Political scientist Arthur Lupia is an expert on ignorance, and he says it's because people care more about values than about facts. With Scott Walker out of the presidential race and polls showing stronger support for unions, Labor leader David Rolf is optimistic about a number of trends, including raising the minimum wage. And journalist Alex Seitz-Wald talks with Bill Press about U.S.-Chinese relations. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Professor Arthur Lupia explains why facts don't matter in political discussions. He says if progressives don't speak to voters about values, it's unlikely they'll listen. And we say hello to Arthur Lupia, political science professor at the University of Michigan and chair of the National Research Council's Roundtable on the Application of Behavioral and Social Science. He is also the author of a new book, Uninformed, Why People Know So Little About Politics and What We Can Do About It. Arthur Lupia, thank you so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you. And, your book takes an academic look at how well-meaning educators don't always communicate information correctly. But this is also a pretty significant political problem as well, is it not?
Yes, it is. It's a problem for a lot of people. A lot of us are highly motivated, and we believe that we have information that other people can use and that they should pay attention to, but they don't. They ignore us, or they're polite when we talk to them, but then, after we talk to them about a candidate or issue, they walk away and they never think about it again. So the question is, what do we do? So educators have the problem, people in politics have the problem that they're not getting the attention or the reactions that they want. A common reaction is to blame the audience, to say they're too stupid to see our brilliance, or they don't understand how important our information is. We criticize our audience for paying attention to all kinds of unimportant things. And what I work on in my research and what I show in the book is that this reaction is, A, not consistent with the facts about how people learn, and more importantly, it's not really helpful for those of us who are trying to speak to people more effectively about politics. So for many well-meaning educators and people in politics, the students are not the problem, it's us. The great thing is there are ways for us to solve our problems. So it's a general issue.
Well, and it is a common complaint amongst progressives, that people who vote conservative, even though they would benefit from liberal policies and government benefits, they don't. Is the problem, as progressives claim, that perhaps the conservative voters are sometimes ignorant of relevant facts? I mean, they have things they can take advantage of. They're right there in front of them, but they're not taking advantage of it. They're critical of it.
Yeah, I think that this is a common reaction, but I think it misdiagnoses the problem a little bit. So, for example, if we criticize poor people for voting Republican, the question is, well, how should they vote? And if we say, well, people should only vote based on the economy or only vote based on their own economic circumstances, then you could make an argument that poor people should vote Republican. But a lot of poor people care about other things. Maybe they're deeply devoted to a Christian faith, or they have a particular view about kind of the military or agriculture or things of that nature, where the positions of the Republican Party are, closer to their values, closer to what they want than the Democratic Party. And in that case, it becomes, all right, well, now which issue is more important? And that's where it gets really difficult to kind of tell people, well, you should think that the economy is more important than your religion. That's where a lot of, attempts to talk to people go south. I think the bigger issue with the idea that people don't vote like I do because they're ignorant is, in a sense, we're all ignorant. I'm considered, for better or worse, one of the world's leading experts on political knowledge. And yet, if you ask me to name any of the laws that Congress passed last year, I'd be hard-pressed to name more than a few. If you asked me to talk about any of the regulations that had been enforced last year, I couldn't name very many of those, and that's true for every single American. So when you look at the facts, there are two types of people. One type is almost completely ignorant of almost all aspects of politics. and the other type is delusional about how much they know. And so the key, the idea that other people aren't supporting us because they're ignorant, I think that misdiagnoses the problem. The key thing in getting people to support your causes is to provide them with information that they'll want to pay attention to and they'll want to act on, and that's what the book's really about.
We're speaking with Arthur Lupia, political science professor at University of Michigan. He's the author of a new book, Uninformed, Why People Know So Little About Politics and What We Can Do About It. There seems to be a challenge then here, perhaps, that making a well-informed political decision depends not just on facts, but facts relevant to each individual voter. In other words, if I don't care about what you care about, is that where the ignorance blame is coming from?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, politics is always about facts and values, right? It's not a math test. Politics is the part of society where we try to manage and deal with some pretty deep conflicts in the values that we have and what we want, and so forth. So we're always dealing with hard problems. The other problem in trying to educate people is our attention spans are really, really limited. If people haven't sort of read about kind of the scientific literature on attention, the advice I give is, however limited you think your attention is, divide that by a really large number and you're closer, right? So the challenge in trying to give people well-informed political decisions is to give them information that they'll want to pay attention to. And that means information that they recognize as being essential to something that they really care about. So it could be their children or it could be something about their values. But if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to break through because there's so many other things in society and pop culture and on the internet that people could pay attention to. So it's really critical for us as educators to try and tap into what a student wants, what an audience wants, and then tell them their story using our information.
Well, and especially when you look at social media and just the amount of information that is at hand to anybody, any day, at any time, political discourse for most Americans just seems to be kind of that collection of dog whistles, simplistic cues like party affiliation, negative advertising. A lot of folks don't read beyond the headlines. How do you get folks to read beyond the headlines, to become more knowledgeable, to make better decisions? I mean, that seems like that's a problem.
It is, and there's two ways to do it. So the one thing I would say is that with politics, most people are actually knowledgeable about some aspects of it. Like, there are some people who are totally out of politics, but there's a lot of other people who know a lot about one issue. It's the one issue that they really care about. So it could be the environment, or it could be the poor, or it could be incarceration of African-American males or something, and they know a lot about that. And they want other people to know about that, and so that's their cause. And so a lot of us have specializations. But then there are all these other political topics out there that we're not so invested in. And so what we tend to do then is look for simple ways to make good decisions. And people say, well, that's kind of cheating, right? I mean, if you use party ID. But what I would say is that, again, if you look at the evidence, we make almost all of our decisions that way. So if you're out driving and you stop at an intersection, let's say you're in a city or in a suburb, and there's like 4 lanes of traffic in each direction on both roads, if you're there in the middle of the day, there are 60 to 100 cars at that intersection. And so the question you have is, when do I press the accelerator and how fast do I go? Now, in some respect, that's a really hard problem, because what you have to guess is when everybody else is going to hit their accelerator and how fast their cars can go. And there are all, with 60 people, there are billions and billions of different combinations of ways that people can press pedals and go. And you have to guess the one that will get you through the intersection without being killed. But as I describe a traffic stop to people, they're like, well, I don't recognize that because I just look at the light. And when it's red, I stop. Most people do. And when it's green, I go. And so we use traffic lights and brand names and things like that to make really important, life-changing decisions every day. So in politics, sometimes things like party ID can be like a traffic light. It is, people don't know all the details, but if they know they're a progressive and they know that progressives think that, a certain thing is worth doing or is really pursued, they use it as a traffic light. And in a lot of cases, not all the time, in a lot of cases, it leads them to make exactly the same decision they would have made had they known a lot more. So I think the key thing is cues can be a problem when they mislead people. But sometimes in politics, cues are like traffic lights, and they actually, they're not perfect, but they get you where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. So those cues are the green lights and the red lights.
Well, it's the funny thing is almost all of our decisions in a day are made based on them. Like if you and I are standing at a street corner and we have to decide when to cross or not, we could go through this great philosophical conversation about what cars do and what roads do and things of that nature, but we don't. We just have simple rules of thumb, and when we see it's clear, we go. All right, and you and I are, I'm 51. I don't know how old you are, but we've made it this far through those types of decisions. Sometimes in politics, things like party ID or interest group endorsements or a trusted, knowledgeable friend on an issue whose values you know and trust, there are traffic lights, and they often lead us to the place we would have gone to if we had become experts ourselves.
Again, we're speaking with Arthur Lupia, political science professor at the University of Michigan and author of a new book, Uninformed, Why People Know So Little About Politics and What We Can Do About It, here on americasdemocrats.org. Is it a significant problem? Because, you've got so many people out there, I hate politics, I hate politicians, but it seems to me that if they perhaps knew a little bit more, if they dug a little bit deeper, maybe they wouldn't feel that way. Do you get a sense of that as well?
I think there's truth to that, but whenever I hear the idea about hating politics, I'm reminded of this poem that was written by Bart Giamatti. So he was, I think he was president of Yale University, he was commissioner of Major League Baseball, and he had this poem about baseball. And the basic idea was in the spring, everybody has possibilities and everybody loves it, and so baseball is like the spring. But in the fall, your dreams are crushed, especially if you're a Cubs fan, right? Because all the teams basically die in the end except one. And so, people have this love-hate relationship with baseball. And I think of politics the same way. Politics is the area of life where we deal with really hard problems, where our value conflicts and the differences in what we want and believe are just put right in front of us. And that's really uncomfortable for people to look at. And so some people say, because these things that I don't like happen in this space called politics, I hate it. And those people who don't do what I want, they're bad, right? And that's an understandable and a common reaction. For some people, if they learned more about politics, they'd get even more frustrated. But I think there's other people, if you wanted to be effective, or if you thought, I have a way to improve the quality of life of progressives, or of progressives and conservatives, or of people who really need it, then what you could learn about politics is ways to build coalitions and ways to really make things happen. I mean, I teach undergraduates all the time, and I tell them, politics isn't something that happens to you. Politics is something that you can affect today if you know how to do it, if you know how to talk to people, if you know how to listen to people and make your ideas their ideas. So I think there are some people, if they learn more about politics, they can be more effective. But I have to say there are other people who would get even madder.
and heads go deeper into the sand, perhaps.
Exactly.
We're talking about those cues. Let's turn it around and talk about when setting public policy. Do facts then just become not as important? What is important for voters to know? And perhaps that's how public policy is created and developed?
So I think facts are critically important, but I think a bigger issue is that in a society like ours, people have different roles, and your role determines what types of information are important to you. So President Obama, he gets a security and intelligence briefing every day, and there's information that he really needs to make decisions that day. If you gave that to you and I, we'd really be interested in that, but there wouldn't be much we could do with it. At the same time, there's information that's critical for you to do your job and me to do my job, right? And so I get that. And if we gave it to President Obama, he's like, why are you handing this to me? So facts are really important, but I think the most important facts to convey to someone are the ones that they can actually use. So in our society, police officers need a certain set of facts. Accountants and budget people need a certain set of facts. Moms, stay-at-home moms and dads need a certain set of facts. Effective education doesn't mean dumping information on them that you think is important. Effective education is giving them information that helps them make better decisions. So I think facts are really important, but if you ask me what's important for voters to know, the first thing I'd say is let's not overload people with information that they can't use and won't use because they don't understand it. Let's do better. Let's find out, what are the types of things that are important to them, and then take the information we have and give it in the context of the concerns that are really important to a mom or to a police officer or to someone who cares about the environment or things of that nature. If we don't speak to people's values, it's unlikely that they'll listen to us.
Well, here's the situation. If perhaps I'm not really interested in something like a global warming, and therefore I'm just ignorant to the facts about global warming or sex education or whatever it is, things like that, if you don't know a little bit more about it, I mean, that could ultimately kill us, could it not?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, there are certain kinds of ignorance that can kill us. So not knowing that a car is coming when you cross a busy street, that can kill you. Not knowing that a food's poisonous can kill you. At the same time, each of us has a really limited attention span, and it's nothing. I do too. It's true of all of us. Like biology doesn't change the rules for any of us here. So we tend to pay attention to things that we think are the most important to us at a particular moment. So for most people, global warming is an abstract concept that might affect things in the future and might affect people far away, but they can't taste it or feel it or touch it or see it. And so it often loses the battle of attention to other things. For a lot of people, global warming is a lot harder to think about than paying the bills or having fun at the beach or cheering for a football team. So most people don't do it. So, and that's, again, biology, no matter how benevolent our intentions are or no matter how important our expertise is, biology doesn't change the rules for us. So I talk to a lot of people, I work with a lot of groups about how to convey climate information more effectively. And a simple story is to get people to think about the environment, like not people who are already committed, but new people, to expand the tent. We have to offer information in ways that our target audience sees as critically related to the things that they care about most. Our information about the environment has to be a way for them to provide for their children, if that's what they really care about, or secure America, if that's what they really care about, or, protect their water, if that's what they really care about. I think that, concrete examples are a bit like a gateway drug. If you can have a conversation and identify examples that people really resonate with, only at that time will they become interested in the broader topic. But if I start to give you the scientific treatise on global warming without examples, I'm Charlie Brown's mother. I mean, I'm wah, and you can't really hear what I'm saying, and you're not that interested. So to get people to think about sex education, global warming, things of that nature, we have to say things in ways that are relevant to their lives.
Okay. Arthur Lupia, political science professor at the University of Michigan. Check out his new book, Uninformed, Why People Know So Little About Politics and What We Can Do About It. Arthur, thank you so much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to having you back again soon.
Thank you, Jim.
You're quite welcome. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Union executive David Rolf thinks we need a new benefits system for what he calls the new on-demand, smartphone-mediated economy. We'll talk to him more about that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
We've got a new darling in the GOP presidential race, Carly Fiorina. Being the darling du jour, however, can be dicey. Just ask Rick Perry and Scott Walker, two former darlings who are now out of the race, having turned into ugly ducklings by saying stupid things. But Fiorina is smart, sharp-witted, and successful. We know this because she and her PR agents constantly tell us so. Be careful about believing anything she says, though, for darling Fiorina is not only a relentless self-promoter, but also a remorseless liar. Take her widely hailed performance in the second debate among Republican wannabes, where she touched many viewers with her impassioned and vivid attack on Planned Parenthood. With barely contained outrage, Fiorina described a video that, she said, shows the Women's Health Organization in a depraved act of peddling body parts of an aborted fetus. "Watch a fully formed fetus on the table, its heart beating, its legs kicking," said a stone-faced Fiorina, looking straight into the camera, while someone says, "We have to keep it alive to harvest its brain." Oh, the horror, the monstrosity of Planned Parenthood! and how moving it was to see and feel the fury of this lady candidate for president. Only none of it is true. While she urged the audience to go watch it, there is no such video, no fetus with kicking legs and beating heart, and no demonic Planned Parenthood official luridly preparing to harvest a brain. This is Jim Hightower saying, so, did Fiorina make up this lie herself? Or did her PR team concoct it as a bit of showbiz drama to burnish her right-wing credentials and advance her political ambition? Or maybe she's just spreading a malicious lie she was told by some haters of Planned Parenthood. Either way, there's nothing darling about it, much less presidential.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. West Coast Union leader David Rolf is optimistic that Congress will eventually follow all the states that are tired of waiting and are raising the minimum wage on their own. And we say hello to David Rolf, who's president of the Service Employees International Union 775 and serves as vice president of SEIU, and also the author of The Fight for $15, The Right Wage for a Working America. David Rolf, thank you so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
I'm happy to be here, Jim.
And great to have you with us, of course. Before we talk about the recent article, tell us where the minimum wage fight is right now in terms of prospects for national action.
Well, I would say this, that Americans are tired of waiting for Congress, and they're tired of waiting for CEOs to do the right thing and increasingly taking matters into their own hands. You know, starting 2 years ago in a little city called SeaTac, Washington, which is our airport town up here in the Pacific Northwest, voters approved a $15 wage for airline, transportation, and hospitality-related employment in that city. And that became a spark that, together with the national fast food strikes that were going on in the same period of time, really focused the nation's attention on the problem of stagnant and declining wages. Since then, we saw the city of Seattle become the first major city to adopt a $15 minimum wage. Subsequently, San Francisco, Los Angeles have adopted $15 minimum wages. We have a $15 proposal that is moving in the summer of 2015 in New York for the fast food industry. We've had the mayors of St. Louis and Kansas City and Boston all say that they want to get the authority to raise wages to 15. The little city of Emeryville, California, raised their minimum wage to $16. And a whole host of other cities and states have done something short of 15, but still very substantial. For example, Chicago, we went to 13. A number of places are now at 11, 11.50, 12, 12.50. And so the minimum wage debate has fundamentally changed. It used to be about every so often getting Congress to make really small, really very linear adjustments to kind of make up for lost time and catch up with inflation. What this movement is saying is something different. That is, you ought to be able to live on your hourly wage. And there's really no place in America you can live on $7.25. So I think we're going to see this expand. I think that it will become an issue in the presidential race in 2016. And at least to the extent it is, in some ways it already is. And I think I'm feeling a whole lot of optimism that this is a movement that has captured the attention and aspirations of Americans.
Do you think it can be a national wage, or will this have to be fought state by state?
Well, here's the way these things usually work. Massachusetts became the first state banning child labor in the 1880s, and Congress finally did it in the 1930s. The same can be true about the 8-hour day. The same can be true about public sector collective bargaining, which ironically began in Wisconsin. In the 30s, before there was a national Social Security Act, some states like California were considering legislation to do statewide social insurance retirement systems. So I think generally speaking, in American political history, it's more likely to see ideas incubated at the municipal and state level and then move nationally rather than the reverse. So clearly, Congress has the authority to institute a national minimum wage of $15. They should do that, and they should do it quickly. But we all know what this Congress is like, and I think that no one would put money at this point on this Congress this year voting for $15. But we also know that Congress and other political institutions are, by definition, in a democracy, sensitive to the will of the people. And if there is enough action at the state and municipal level, then I think that's when we're going to see Congress really do something.
Mm-hmm. You have another article that you co-authored with Nick Hanauer, which describes a workforce that is now and possibly forever made up of not of employees, but of freelancers, contractors, temps. Is that reversible, or is it necessarily a bad thing?
It's not reversible. It's not all a bad thing. We should make a distinction between misclassified independent contractors, people who really ought to be employees, but their employers are using creative legal loopholes to try to avoid paying taxes or employment benefits. That's just breaking the law, and that's not a good thing. And so if you really work for an employer, the employer sets your wage unilaterally, the employer determines the control of your workday, your schedule, the details of how you do your job, you're an employee under the law. And whether you work for a large manufacturing company or whether you work for a large transportation company in the new economy, the law should, employers should obey the law. But let's talk about the folks who are not truly employees, who truly are freelancers and independent contractors, many of them working for not just traditional temp agencies and not sort of as creative professionals in the freelance space, but people getting their daily jobs off of Amazon Turk or off of TaskRabbit, people who make part of their living as hosts on Airbnb. It would be hard to call this group of folks employees in the traditional sense, but that doesn't mean they're not workers. And really what we try to get to in the article is, all right, well, if they're workers but they're not employees, how do we update the 20th century's set of both of employment benefits and social insurance benefits to make sure that we're not leaving this growing group of tens of millions of Americans behind? Yeah,
so how do you do that?
What the article proposes is that that we essentially call all of the traditional employment-related benefits universal, portable, and prorated. This isn't a big new idea, actually. It's the way Social Security works or Medicare works. If you work for an hour for one employer and 6 hours for another employer, both employers contribute towards your Social Security or towards your Medicare. However, in this new economy of workforce distribution apps on your smartphone, where people are often 1099 workers and independent contractors, there's no mechanism for whoever is paying them at the moment to make those contributions, much less to contribute to health care, to a private retirement account, to state unemployment insurance or workers' compensation insurance pools, to a pooled sick leave or vacation leave fund. And that means that a lot of people are working without a retirement plan, without Social Security, without workers' compensation insurance, without unemployment insurance, without health care. And there's really a pretty simple way of doing that. And it was developed a long time ago. When the nation set up Social Security and Medicare, we simply said these are universal, they're prorated, and they're portable. If we did the same thing with, say, sick leave, or the same thing with unemployment or workers' compensation insurance, it would provide protections to tens of millions of Americans who are now working in this new on-demand, smartphone-mediated economy.
We're speaking with David Rolf, president of the SEIU 775, also serves as an international vice president of SEIU. Your portrait is one of a collapsing middle class and of an entire economy. You cast some blame on the Democratic Party. Why is that?
Well, I wouldn't say we blame the Democratic Party as a political party. I would say that politicians of both political parties, through a combination of malice and negligence, have contributed to the decline of wage earners and the middle class in America. Over 40 years of our recent history, we've experienced a war on workers and a war on the middle class. We have seen wages stagnate and shrink for the bottom 90% of income earners. We've seen healthcare costs transferred onto workers and their families. We have seen the virtual elimination of defined benefit pension programs. We have seen most retirement savings for the bottom 90% eliminated. The middle class has lost most of the assets it accumulated since the Second World War. We priced college education out of reach for the middle class, and thus they're willing to take on staggering levels of debt. We've shredded the funding mechanisms for urban and rural public schools. We've outsourced manufacturing. We've imported third world wages. And in general, created a set of policies that tend to concentrate wealth and income at the top of the income scale and reward those who are already winners, while they make it harder and harder for regular working Americans to have any opportunity to get there themselves. That didn't just happen under Ronald Reagan, although he was probably the worst offender. But from the City Hall to the State House to the White House, politicians of both political parties have facilitated the passage of policies that have made the problem worse and not better.
Now, you and Nick Hightower have this specific program to help millennials, the shared security system. How would it be implemented? How long would it take? Would it possibly disadvantage those people who do have steady long-term employment? You know, those that are under kind of the traditional workforce.
No, it would actually advantage those folks because right now they're in an implicit competition with folks who don't get benefits or have taxes paid on their behalf. So if you are a driver for a traditional transportation company and you're considered an employee, your employer is doing the right thing, making a health premium contribution, paying their Medicare and Social Security taxes, unemployment and workers' compensation. Those are real costs that your employer takes on in order to keep you as an employee. Meanwhile, if their competitor is paying someone as an independent contractor, same wage rate theoretically, but without any of those extra costs, it actually makes it harder for that traditional employee to keep their job. But if we provide a universal level playing field that everyone has to participate in, then you can compete on the quality of your customer service. You can compete on how fast you can bring new services and products to market. But it has the impact of taking those benefit costs out of competition by universalizing it. And again, this isn't really a new idea. It's one we set up with Social Security and Medicare. It's what we see in some other countries around other forms of social insurance. It's really just a question of how to update it for a world where we don't all work in factories for 40 hours a week for 40 years of our lives.
Yeah, you're not talking about reinventing the wheel. You're just talking about making the wheel more adaptable to today's environment.
Yeah, well, the economy has changed. The way people find work, the way people keep work, how long they work, for how many employers is dramatically changed, right? Okay. And today, the largest transportation company in the world is something called Uber. It owns no cars, and it claims to employ no drivers. The largest hospitality company in the world is something called Airbnb. It has no employees who actually clean rooms or greet you at the front desk, and it doesn't own any hotel rooms. So how do you adapt the world, or rather, how do you adapt the benefits that people used to quite reasonably expect for employment to this new world of disintermediated, disaggregated, sort of technology-distributed work? That's really the question we're asking, and it doesn't really involve a whole lot more than applying a set of very old principles to this new space. Okay.
All about adaptation. David Rolf, president of the SEIU Union 775, also serving as international vice president of SEIU. David, thank you so much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to having you back again with us soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we appreciate your time. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, Bill Press and his guest, journalist Alex Seitz-Wald.
We're catching up with the political news of the day with a good friend from MSNBC. Alex Seitz-Wald's been on the road, particularly with the Democratic candidates. And Alex, it's always good to see you.
Morning, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Are you a fantasy football fan? Do you ever get into?
You know, I got fantasy football's a little bit over my head. I always want to get into it, but I'm.
Well, we're going to give you an opportunity. We want to tell you we have a league of our own here at the Bill Press Show on FanDuel, FanDuel.com
/Bill Press
/Bill Press, and we've been competing against our listeners and our viewers for the last 2 weeks, and they've been beating the crap out of us, Alex. It's a little embarrassing, you know. No, well, not that bad.
It's been pretty bad.
I had one good week.
Yeah, Jamie had one good week, and you had a.
I had a better week than I had the first week last week.
Okay, so this week,
I'm on the up.
All right, we're heading into this weekend. We just want to remind you all: get your join the league, and we challenge you. Take us on. One of these days, we're going to beat the crap out of you, right?
Yeah.
So,
it's great.
But we like the fact that our friends are also out there. They're making money, too.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm going to kick their butts. That's what it comes down to. The more people that play, the more money is at stake here. So you've got to get in. You've got to get in because you've got a better chance of getting the big
And we
money.
can get up to 100 in our league.
Up to 100 in this week's league.
Okay.
But I guarantee I'm going to come in at number 1 this week. That's a guarantee.
I hope you're right. So let's make it to it's FanDuel.com/Bill Press. And
I guarantee that the first 2 weeks.
Check it out.
Prediction.
I have been told, Alex, that even a monkey can play it, right? Even an idiot.
I've never done fantasy football before, and it's so intuitive. It's great. I love it.
People take this stuff so seriously. I'm intimidated.
They really do.
You know?
Oh no, they do take it seriously, man. Our listeners and viewers, they're in there. They're in it to win it.
One final thing I'll say about this is, if you are intimidated by fantasy football, the thing is, this goes week to week.
Yes.
So if you have a bad week, it's okay. You're not stuck with those same crappy players for the rest of the season. You just start fresh the next week. So if you had a bad week last week, like Jamie did, or a bad week the week before that, like I did, even playing field this week.
Yeah. All right. So, Alex, let's look at the Democratic field. You were just up in New Hampshire at the state convention up there with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, Link Chafee, and Martin O'Malley.
Martin O'Malley.
Right?
No Jim Webb there. But
no Jim. Is there a Jim Webb?
It's a great question. I actually just wrote something about this. So he had skipped that event in New Hampshire, which every candidate was at. Lawrence Lessig was there, too, the new entrant, Tier 5 of the Democratic field. And he also skipped a DNC meeting in Minneapolis.
We were there. And
no Jim Webb in sight. And then there's an upcoming, another one of these big cattle calls in Iowa, which Jim Webb was not on the press release that went out, with it. But just yesterday, his spokesperson tells me that Jim Webb will be there. He insists he's still in the race. But, a lot of people at these events have been talking to me about it. Webb got in, not to get too in the weeds here, after the rest of the candidates got in, so we haven't seen any campaign finance reports from him. We're coming up in just a couple days at the end of the next finance quarter, so it has some people wondering if, he just hasn't raised any money and he's he's looking at the exits.
All right, so the Fox News, there are so many polls throwing around, but I'm going to look at the Fox News poll yesterday that came out. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton still holding a strong lead at 44%, followed by Bernie Sanders at 30%, and Joe Biden at 18%. What's up with Biden?
I mean, this is the big unanswered question of the Democratic primary and could completely change everything. I think we'd have to look at the primary, before Biden and after Biden, A-B. If he gets in, this would just completely change anything. There was another poll where we had 25%, Bloomberg poll yesterday. So without even doing anything, hardly, without announcing, without really
He had 25?
He had 25%. So 1 out of 4 Democratic voters nationally would support. I mean, he's the vice president. He's having this incredible wave of sympathy right now. But he says he's undecided. I've talked to his people, and they insist that he has not made up his mind. He is taking a close look at this. He's talking to people to get a team in place in case he wants to actually push the button and go. There are those conversations happening, but he still has not made up his mind. And what his people tell me is, it's really day to day with him. He's still very much mourning the loss of his son, Beau. And some days he wants to focus on that, and he says, there's no way that I could commit to doing this run. It wouldn't be right for my family. And there are other days when he says, this is exactly what he wanted me to do, and I need to do it. So we just have to wait and see. But the window is closing every day.
Right. The first debate is October 13. He's got to be in that first debate, wouldn't you agree?
Right. I mean, that's the first deadline. And then you have filing deadlines coming up to get on the ballot in key states. You have, Iowa and New Hampshire in February, and there's another debate in December. So the kind of two scenarios that people have sketched out for me here is either he gets in before the first debate and he's in and he's off, or he kind of sits back a little bit and assumes the kind of white knight position in case something really disastrous happens with Hillary Clinton. But there's no point of him getting in the polls and getting in the mud now if he's going to do that. Also, I think for him, this is a guy who was in the Senate for 36 years, been vice president for 6 years. The moment he says definitively he's not running for president, his career is effectively over. That's it. It's the end of the road for him. So I think that's why he's really taking his time and stretching this out.
My theory is that he was waiting for the Pope. And all this good footage that he's going to have, big hugs with the Pope and holding hands with the Pope or whatever. And then that's
his campaign.
That's his campaign.
And we're waiting for the Pope to, say, I just had a conversation with the big guy, and he wants you. You're in.
You're good.
Yeah. Right. That's probably the way it's going to be. The Hillary people are now saying, I've heard this from a couple of them myself, that Bernie Sanders has peaked. Bernie's had his time, and now kind of this is it. Do the polls show that? Is there any evidence of that? Did you see that in New Hampshire?
It's really hard to tell because there's so much noise in these polls. But that's to me always been the big question about Bernie Sanders is, does he have a ceiling, which is the kind of Dean voters, the left wing of the Democratic Party, and would he have trouble getting beyond that, especially among minority voters who obviously in the Democratic Party, a huge percentage. I think it's possible. I think we haven't seen enough evidence yet. But there are, without a doubt, some major strategic, mechanical issues from him. I mean, he still doesn't have a single endorsement from a sitting member of Congress, sitting member of the Senate, a sitting governor. And historically, that's always been the best predictor of who wins a party's primary is who actually gets the most endorsements. There's also a question about, is he peaking too early? We're in August, we're September here now, coming up in October. We still have a lot of months to go before voters actually get to the polls. As one Clinton person put it to me, if you're hot when it's hot, you're cold when it's cold. So if you're hot in the summer, you're cold in the winter. And then all those, you've got the 4 states in February, but then on March 1st, 17 states all go at once, and then there's another 23 states in the rest of March. Can he put together the operation to run ads in all those states, to hire staff in all those states? The Clinton people feel that that's their firewall, that they just are going to have the organizational muscle to stop any kind of challenge at that point, whether it's Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden.
Does Bernie have a ground operation and a ground campaign in those early states?
He absolutely does. Yeah, he absolutely does in those early states. I was just up in New Hampshire and didn't turn out as many people to the convention. The way these conventions work, Bill. The campaigns gather people, you bust them in. So it's a show of force how many people you have cheering for you in these big audiences that they pack. Clinton, without a doubt, had the most. Sanders has been building up a big ground operation in Iowa and New Hampshire. His people say that they'll soon have more people than Hillary Clinton on the ground in those states, but they're a little bit later to get off the ground and running there. But again, that's it's Iowa and New Hampshire. What happens when you get to Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, California, New York, Texas, all these other states that go in March? can he build the operation there? We have to wait and see.
All right. And on the Republican side, Donald Trump still holding his own, but Carly Fiorina is the one who is moving up for sure. Marco Rubio, too, a little bit, too. We are able to keep all the political candidates straight with the help of good friends like Alex Seitz-Wald from MSNBC, MSNBC.com. You see him on the road, usually following the Democratic candidates around. What's your next field trip or your next?
I got this week off because we're coming up on the end of the campaign finance period, so everyone is raising money. They're all up in hoity-toity land, which is so all the campaign reporters are taking this week off. They're going on vacation for a change.
Is that right? Because no political events.
There's no public political events. Everyone's raising that money.
But how about on the Republican side? Same thing.
Well, Republican side, I mean, you can't when you've got 15, whatever we're at, candidates now.
How many are left? 14, I think.
14.
Right. But if you count out Gilmore, Perry, and
Walker,
we're 14, although not all of them are serious. But
right. Well, some of the, like Jeb Bush, some of the guys who have to raise a lot more money, they might slow down a little bit. And we've also got this government shutdown fight happening here. We got the Pope happening here. There's a lot of fun stuff happening in D.C.
Going back to that same Fox poll showing today, Donald Trump holding his own at 26, 8 points over the other outsider, Ben Carson, who's at second at 18. On third place now, thanks to being propelled a little bit by the last the CNN debate last week, Carly Fiorina and Marco Rubio both at 9. 9 is still single digits. It's still way behind Donald Trump, but they both moved up thanks to a good debate performance. Is this just a little bubble for Carly, do you think, or can it go beyond this?
It's hard for me to see how long she survives, and granted, we all said this about Donald Trump, but I think it's a little bit different with her. I mean, and you started to see the hint of it as soon as the HP stuff gets in the bloodstream.
I'm telling you, yeah.
I just laid off 3,000 people, fired by the board of directors.
30,000.
30,000. I dropped a zero there. Named by Forbes, one of those magazines, one of the worst CEOs of all time. And she has nothing else on her resume except for a losing California Senate bid. I just don't really see, how she stays on that long. That said, her debate performance was very strong. She's getting big crowds down in South Carolina all this week. But, if you're looking for the outsider candidate, you have Donald Trump, you've maybe Ben Carson, you maybe Carly Fiorina for a little while. But at least like the Clinton people who watch this very closely and are, eager to pick their next rival, they're not too concerned about Carly Fiorina.
And if you look at her debate her campaign against Barbara Boxer, she ran a wretched campaign. I know from California, living through it.
Right, and spent some ungodly amount of money, which is, you would think that if you have all the money to spend in the world, you could hire the smartest people and run the best thing, and that clearly wasn't the case.
Isn't she the one responsible for that Demon Sheep ad? Remember that crazy Demon Sheep ad? One of the weirdest political commercials I've ever seen.
And by the way, the big issue throughout their campaign was her wretched performance at Hewlett-Packard at HP, where she got the nickname Carly Fiorina, and she didn't have a good answer then, and I don't think she has a good answer now. She says, "Well, these were tough times, and I made tough decisions." Well, a lot of other companies were going through tough times and made smarter decisions.
Right, and I think we haven't heard about it yet because she hasn't really been a factor, so no one's bothered to talk about it too much. Donald Trump went after it a little bit. He's not the greatest messenger for this, considering that his company's declared bankruptcy 4 times or whatever it is. But, you could imagine a scenario like in 2012 where Newt Gingrich, or the super PAC supporting Newt Gingrich at least, dropped something like $10-15 million behind those King of Bain ads against Mitt Romney. I mean, Newt Gingrich was the first guy to bring Bain Capital into the 2012 campaign, long before Barack Obama did. So you could picture a similar situation where, Jeb Bush or whoever the kind of establishment candidate is running ads, Carly Fiorina lost 30,000 jobs, fired by the board, and it's just really hard to in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing, and she just doesn't have a good answer.
Right. So it to me, it looks like a pattern that we saw in 2012 2012, which is everybody sort of had their moment in the sun, you know. Even at the end, Rick Santorum was ahead and won the Iowa caucus. But Michelle Bachmann at one time was the media star. Herman Cain was a media star at one time, you know, and I think maybe this is Carly Fiorina's moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's like whack-a-mole in a lot of ways. You know, no one pays attention to these backroom candidates, and then somebody else gets knocked off. They come up, but then all the firepower, you know, you get media scrutiny because you're now a front runner. You get your opponents coming after you, and then you get knocked down, and then somebody else comes up and you get knocked down. The one wild card, what makes this different from 2012, is Donald Trump.
Yes.
Who is leading the polls, who is, you know, everybody who has come after him has had it blow up in their face. And I think with him, you know, people keep asking when does he get out? What is his exit? The only reason that people drop out of a presidential campaign is if they run out of money. And Donald Trump ain't going to run out of money. I mean, he doesn't need a super PAC. He doesn't need a billionaire. He's his own billionaire. So he'll have to be up to him on his own timetable when it no longer becomes fun for him. And I just don't know when that'll be.
All right. Fun to watch. A lot of fun to watch with you. Thanks, Alex. All right. Great to see you. MSNBC.com. Don't forget.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Arthur Lupia, David Rolf, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate.